Trump warns to impose tariffs on Russia if no deal with Ukraine is reached. Macron pledges to double the military budget by 2027. And Bitcoin surpasses $120,000 milestone amidst policy optimism. You're watching Q News with me, Hani Saif, and this is the Economic Bulletin. We'll start off with the recent news as President Donald Trump has just said that the United States would impose very severe tariffs on Russia in 50 days if there is no deal to stop the war in Ukraine. Trump stated that Russia's economy is going really bad and that President Putin must save his economy. Sitting side by side with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte in the Oval Office, Trump told reporters that he is disappointed in Russian President Vladimir Putin. Trump also added that trade is great for settling wars. He noted that NATO members, not American taxpayers, would cover the cost of the weapons. In related news, European Union ministers have agreed to prioritize negotiations with the United States to avoid the threatened 30% tariffs that the EU trade chief said would wreck transatlantic trade. European Trade Commissioner Maros Sivkovic highlighted that talks with US counterparts were approaching a good outcome for both sides, but the new tariff threat had created a new dynamic. French Trade Minister Laurent Saint-Martin also noted that the EU should go beyond what the Commission had outlined to date, adding that the bloc should also look at targeting US services or use its wide-ranging anti-coercion instrument. For his part, the Danish Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen has said that EU member states have declared US President Donald Trump's threat of a 30% tariff absolutely unacceptable.
Today, we discussed the state of play and prospects for EU-US trade relations, including possible EU countermeasures. In light of the ongoing negotiations for an agreement in principle, as well as President Trump's announcement over the weekend of 30% general tariffs on the EU from the 1st of August, which I must say member states find absolutely unacceptable and unjustified.
In Europe, Germany's Bundesbank has warned that the country's economy has broadly lost competitiveness in global markets. In a report, it added that German export market shares have declined since 2017 and have grown particularly weakly in international comparison since 2021, which has significantly contributed to the crisis in the German economy. Bundesbank, however, highlighted that Trump is not responsible for Germany's export decline. French President Emmanuel Macron has announced a plan to push forward the country's defense spending, pledging to double the military budget by 2027 in response to a complex geopolitical moment.
Le budget des armées en 2017 était de 32 milliards d'euros. s'ajoutera à la loi de programmation militaire actuelle un effort de 3,5 milliards d'euros en 2026 et de 3 milliards d'euros supplémentaires l'année suivante. Nous consacrerons donc 64 milliards d'euros pour notre défense en 2027. C'est le double du budget dont les armées disposaient en 2017. En tout état de cause, nous refusons que ce réarmement passe par l'endettement. Notre indépendance militaire est indissociable de notre indépendance financière. Il sera donc financé par plus d'activité et plus de production. Et au fond, soyons simples. Pour être libre dans ce monde, il faut être craint. Pour être craint, il faut être puissant. La nation, pour cela, doit être plus forte, car c'est à la nation avant tout de défendre la nation.
Moving on to Asia, Deputy Director of China's General Administration of Customs, Wang Lingjuan, has stated that China and the European Union have seen robust growth in trade and deeper economic cooperation over the past 5 decades. He noted that trade data shows increasing integration of supply and industrial chains between the two sides, reaching 2.82 trillion yuan, a year-on-year increase of 3.5%. Meanwhile, daily trade exceeded 15 billion yuan. Wang added that in the first half of the year, the European Union accounted for 12.9% of China's total foreign trade value. Wang also emphasized that cooperation potential between China and the EU remains high, particularly in connectivity and green development. People's Bank of China has reported that it issued 12.92 trillion yuan in new yuan-denominated loans in the first half of the year. The bank noted that by the end of June, the balance of various types of Chinese yuan loans extended by financial institutions stood at 268.56 trillion yuan, up 7.1% year-on-year. In the first half of 2025, the balance of various types of Chinese yuan loans increased by 12.92 trillion yuan, indicating that the financial system maintained a high level of credit support for the real economy. The bank's report also pointed out that in the first 6 months, household loans increased by 1.17 trillion yuan, of which short-term loans decreased by 300 million yuan and medium-long-term loans increased by 1.17 trillion yuan. The General Administration of Customs has revealed that China's total goods imports and exports in yuan-denominated terms rose 2.9% during the first half of 2025 on an annual basis to 21.79 trillion yuan. Data also revealed that China's trade in goods registered 21.79 trillion yuan in the first 6 months of the year, marking an annual increase of 2.9%. Exports also rose 7.2% to 13 trillion, while imports fell 2.7% to 8.79 trillion. However, the country's exports and imports in the second quarter went up by 4.5% year-on-year, 3.2 percentage points faster than the first quarter, maintaining growth for 7 consecutive quarters. The Ministry of Public Security has reported that China registered a record 5.622 million new energy vehicles in the first half of 2025, a 27.86% year-on-year increase. NEV registrations accounted for 44.97% of all new automobile registrations in the 6-month period. By the end of June 2025, the total ownership of motor vehicles nationwide reached 460 million units, with NEV ownership reaching 36.89 million units, accounting for 10.27% of the nation's overall automobile fleet. From January to June, battery electric vehicles remained the dominant force in China's NEV market, totaling nearly 25.54 million units and accounting for 69.23% of all new energy vehicles. Singapore's government data has revealed that the economy grew a faster than expected 4.3% in the second quarter year-on-year, despite a dimming outlook due to global economic uncertainty. On a quarter-on-quarter seasonally adjusted basis, gross domestic product grew 1.4% in the April to June period. The Ministry of Statistics has reported that India's annual retail inflation hit a more than 6-year low of 2.1% in June, down from 2.82% in May. This figure, the lowest since January 2019, strengthens the case for further interest rate cuts. The decline was driven by cooling food prices, with food inflation turning negative in June, with negative 0.92% in rural areas and negative 1.22% in urban areas. Overall inflation also eased, settling at 1.72% in rural regions and 2.56% in cities. The Reserve Bank of India maintains an inflation target of 2% to 6%. India's wholesale price index also turned negative in June at negative 0.13%, its first negative reading in 2025. In Australia, New Zealand Education Minister Erica Stanford has revealed that the country's plan to double its national education market by 2034 through offering incentives that include relaxing rules around foreign students working part-time while studying. She stated that with international student enrollment steadily increasing since 2023, the government wants to supercharge the growth track to reach 7.2 billion New Zealand dollars by 2034. Stanford added that in the short term, Education New Zealand will focus its promotional efforts on markets with the highest potential for growth. Bitcoin has surpassed $120,000 for the first time, marking a milestone for the world's largest cryptocurrency as investors bet on long-sought policy wins for the industry this week. Bitcoin scaled a record high of $123,153.22 before pulling back slightly to trade at 2.4% higher around $122,000. Ether, the second largest token, scaled a more than 5-month peak of $3,059.6, while XRP and Solana gained about 3% each. CoinMarketCap data revealed that the sector's total market value has swelled to about $3.81 trillion. The U.S. House of Representatives is set to pass a series of crypto-related bills in a week. The most notable is a bill that would establish a regulatory framework for stable coins and is likely to advance to President Donald Trump's desk. U.S. pre-market trading shares of crypto exchange Coinbase surged 1.7%, while Bitcoin holder Strategy climbed 3.3%. Crypto miner Mara Holdings jumped 4.6%. Hong Kong's listed spot Bitcoin ETFs launched by China AMC, Harvest and Bozera all hit record highs. And for more insight into Bitcoin's new highs and what's driving the market, we're joined now from Beirut by the digital economist, Mr. Rudy Shoshani. Welcome to Q News. Mr. Shoshani, now Bitcoin just topped $120,000. What's behind this sharp rally, and is that sustainable?
That's the biggest $1 million question, or $1 million Bitcoin question. Is it sustainable? We are feeling a big down trend, let's call it. But so far, since Trump has been up in Washington, and he's promised that he wants to hype it, but he didn't do it the way he promised. But now we can see more and more driving of adoption, even from legislation. The Genius Act that is done a few weeks ago that established a framework for stable coins. Was it the clarity? Is it a commodity? Is it a security? So now we're having more clarity on this. Is it anti-CBDC laws and surveillance act that refute the CBDC, which is central bank digital currencies? So there's a lot of things happening on the policy, on the price correlation. There's institutional confidence, macro dynamics, of course, Trump administration and its role. And today we have the ISO 20022, which will be effective. What does this ISO mean? It's a messaging system for interbank that works for crypto. So that means that the Federal Reserve has officially adopted this. That means they are hunting similar ground as Visa ISO messaging, which is a standard similar to SWIFT messaging. So now we have a global standard that is adopted and will be based on crypto. So adoption is there, making it easy for everyone to adopt it is finally here. The people, the incentive, the crowd, the investors, I think things are falling around. Now comes your big questions. Will it be sustainable? The way we're seeing it is always going up. We might have some incidents that might affect it, but not in the current cycle or not in the current moment the way it is going, because we have all of the positive signs, all of the positive pillars showing big support from trading perspective, from exchanges perspective, that everything is actually pointing up.
Well, you've mentioned the Genius Act. Now, it does aim to regulate stable coins and allow digital dollar issuance. Do you think this could impact, or would it even impact the market and its stability?
It will impact the market, not in the short term. This needs a while to be implemented, but maybe on a longer term. But in the end of the day, if a dollar is, paper, or actually currently it is a digital dollar, regardless of the paper, because the amount of being printed in the last few years is printed digitally. But now we have a stable coin that can be traded anywhere in the world. And finally, we might be having the US digital dollar, not USDT, in terms of how companies are being benefiting. If you look at USDT by itself, the amount of profits they have, and it's emulating the digital dollar, that's an economy by itself. So what if now the US and other major players using the Genius Act, which is really changes the full reserve of banking into a digital aspect? I think we're going to be seeing more and more adoption, more and more growth in the ecosystem, and more trust. That's what we need, the trust factor, that this crazy crypto, if you want to call it, that has been ups and downs, that we saw it different cycles. There was scams at one point of time. That doesn't mean there's no more scams, but similarly to other currencies or technology, now is being adopted officially by all of those big players. Was it from big banks, or was it from ETFs, or was it from BlackRock, or all of those investments vehicles and companies that are working globally and bringing this to the consumer itself?
Well, the role, as you've mentioned, of institutional buyers and the exchange-traded fund inflows, how significant really will it be on this current trend?
Well, it's a major effect. You know, we can do it without this adoption. And if XRP, if in a few weeks, if you follow XRP, there's a huge campaign, was it direct or indirect or influenced, that if ISO 2022 is being adopted as a global messaging system, that means every single bank now will drop his SWIFT, drop their traditional banks, and then jump into this global new way of doing instantaneous transaction. So there's a huge shift. And if you notice SWIFT back in 2018 and 2019, on the days of when they got the biggest hack, $100+ million that went to Bangladesh because of lack of security. And then they discovered, we are unprotected for cybersecurity. In the same time, we're being challenged by the new players such as XRP and so on. So starting from XRP and going into the legislation, adoption, going into how BlackRock with ETFs, and soon we might be having also the Ethereum ETFs that are possibly to be approved by the SEC. It's going to be another huge game changer for the ecosystem itself, and how they're going to be more and more adopting such technologies and trading. If we look around us now, especially now in the Middle East, which is we are secondary to this whole new technologies, more and more exchange houses, traditional exchange houses, are jumping into the investments of crypto. So they're adding new crypto to their portfolios. That was something we've not seen for a while. Now it's being done, offered through ETFs or offered directly through trading. So I think the future is only bright, and more adoption is the only word. If you look at now, I think we're reaching around 1 billion wallet in the crypto space. So that's a big indicator where things are actually going.
Mm-hmm. Well, Congress has kicked off the Crypto Week, debating major legislation. How might these proposed bills reshape the crypto landscape in the US and maybe then in turn how old?
Yeah, we've seen the pre-Trump administration versus now with all of those bills. We were expecting them, and this is what Trump said from day one. You know, I will issue a lot of decrees, a lot of hype, a lot of U.S. committees, legislations, and so on and so on. He didn't do it, but now I think he's more focused on this and his administration, because we had to change Gary Gensler, which was against all of this. So if this happens in the U.S., guess what the world will be following? The U.S. So the U.S. is a major player in a global economy and a global shaping the crypto world. And if the US rejects something, the rest of the world will definitely have to reject it, because the central of the finance or economy is actually being driven through the US. So if it is adopted, and this is how we see it going forward with all of those legislation and activities, workshops, House of US House committees, all of this. And now with ETFs, possibly, the world will only follow. So now if you open a bank account wherever you are, you have to technically declare it to the US. And then the US has to approve or not, one way or another, if you have nationality and so on. And if you are on FATCA or so on. So you are directly following the US, whatever you want with their legislation. So what if now crypto is on the agenda of everyone? Definitely it's going to be on every single country's agenda. And then if we look at today's ecosystem in the Middle East and how it is growing, and knowing, for example, Saudi bans and doesn't allow its citizens to deal with it. And then all of a sudden the US will influence one way or indirectly one of the biggest economies in the Middle East and Asia. This is in our region. So imagine the European Union, which has been legislation for a long term, and now with MiCA and other legislation. So hopefully we'll have some more adoption globally for that global citizen cryptocurrencies or currencies as they fold.
Yes. From Beirut, that was the digital economist, Mr. Rudy Shoshani. Mr. Shoshani, thank you very much for joining us here on Q News Economic Bulletin. And back to our news, global markets showed mixed movements on Monday, with U.S. futures posting slight gains while European benchmarks were largely down, and Asian indices saw varied performance. In the U.S., futures for the S&P 500 inched up 0.03%. The Nasdaq also edged up 0.15%, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 0.06%. In Europe, the UK's FTSE 100 gained 0.55%, while France's CAC 40 went down 0.37%. Germany's DAX slipped 0.48%. In Asia, Japan's Nikkei 225 fell 0.28%. However, the Shanghai Composite Index edged up 0.27%, and Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index rose 0.26%. In the commodities sector, oil prices have steadied on Monday, holding close to their highest level in 3 weeks, as investors eyed further U.S. sanctions on Russia that may affect global supplies while tariff uncertainty weighed. Brent crude futures rose 0.2% to $70.52 a barrel, while U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures also climbed 0.2% to $68.57 a barrel. Gold prices have steadied after hitting a 3-week peak on Monday with a tension on trade talks and U.S. economic data, while silver climbed to its highest level since September 2011. Spot gold was little changed at $3,356.95 per ounce, after reaching its highest point since June 23rd earlier. U.S. gold futures were steady as well, at $3,365.3. These are all the economic and financial news we have for now, but here's a reminder for today's main stories. Trump warns to impose tariffs on Russia if no deal with Ukraine is reached. Macron pledges to double the military budget by 2027. And Bitcoin surpasses $120,000 milestone amidst policy optimism. This concludes our economic bulletin for now, but please don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Q News EGY to stay informed. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates coming up here on Q News.